This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Things We Carry. My name is Varshni, as always. Well, yeah, my name hasn't changed since the last time we did this. And today I have Payal Sinha with me. Payal is extremely accomplished. She's an attorney and executive board member at the California Lawyers Association and an advisor for the California Young Lawyers Association. Through her legal practice, she has been committed to representing survivors of interpersonal violence in legal matters, including assistance with immigration cases, restraining orders, and family law cases at the state and federal court. Payal's efforts have always been focused on making resources available to those with traditionally limited access to courts and those with limited financial resources as well. In addition to all of this, she also volunteers her time helping a network for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. Thank you so much for making the time today to be here. It's so amazing to have you and really excited to learn more about your work and everything that you do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. We're just going to jump right into the first question. And before that, also, as always, thank you to Sauce for Cause and Bard FM for making this possible. And Sauce for Cause also has a ton of resources, so please reach out to them. Their information is always listed. If you are experiencing any of the things listed, they have resources for you as well. But getting into Payal's background and how you entered this world and this line of work, what is your family's immigration story or your own immigration story in this country?
That's a very good question. I think my immigration story resonates with a lot other students as well. I came to the US for doing my master's, and I did my master's in law with USC, Gold School of Law. It was a very interesting experience because that was my first time ever actually leaving India and coming to a foreign country, right? That's what we
Wow,
say.
okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
US was, the one. And just the experiences, the network, the community, the people here, it was great experience in terms of one growing up.
Mhm.
Suddenly from I always had like a secured life in terms of family, friends, and everything, and suddenly you have to do everything on your own. So
Yeah.
it was a big switch. Uh, and it was very interesting. And I think that had a big part in growth and development. And I feel like everyone should do some kind of this stuff, like be able to go to a foreign country or different country to be able to like get access to education. Sometimes there are opportunities, sometimes there are none, but even going to a different state or even participating in diverse fellowships, because it's very important to work with different communities, even with like different people from different backgrounds, because that actually give you different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And that broaden your mindset, and you get to learn so much. You
Mhm.
become patient with you,
Yeah.
and you grow up. I would say.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing.
No, it's 100% a good thing, but that is pretty crazy coming here to go to law school. You're what, like 24, 23, maybe even younger?
25. I was a lawyer in India as well. I
Okay.
became a lawyer when I was 21, and I
Oh my
was
God.
practicing. Yes, I know. Oh my God, now I feel like, oh my God, I'm so old. But
No, no,
before,
no, not at all. Not at all. But 21 to be a lawyer, were you in the same field in India as well? Or
that's a very good question. Actually, you know what? When I told my parents that I want to be a lawyer, so my dad is a lawyer, my Baba, which is Dadaji, was a judge, right? I never actually uh, met Mataji. But it was very interesting because my dad was a lawyer, but he was at that point of time when I was pursuing law was into banking, and
okay,
now he is like a full-fledged lawyer who has his own practice. Uh,
okay.
he discouraged me to not go into the profession, especially back in India around that time when I pursued my law degree. Things were changing, right? Things were changing because the profession was not for women. That was the
Yeah.
perception, right?
Okay.
And they not discouraged me in any bad way. They wanted the best for me. I think the logic was that you might not get equal opportunities that we talk
Yeah.
about, right? And there might be a lot more barriers, but thank God things changed while I was pursuing law around the same time, and a lot of girls were and women were like pursuing law. And
Mhm.
now I feel like in India, and even like because I was in Delhi, and Delhi Bar Association
Yeah.
has a huge community of strong women and leaders,
Mhm.
doing the work that they do and paving the path for people
Yeah.
like us. So I am glad that I did that. And yes, I didn't have like huge dreams and goals. My at that point, my wish was to be able to secure a job. But I somewhat knew that I wanted to be in the court system, uh,
Okay.
or litigate, not so much for a corporate job style.
Mhm.
Somewhat there was a click. So that was what I did. I did 2 years of judicial clerkship before I came
Mhm.
here, and it's a funny story because I started doing intellectual property, and
Oh, wow.
have a tendency to go into an area which is not very explored, to like know, and it's curious mind. What can
Yeah.
I say? I did that, and when I came here for my master's focused on intellectual property, and when I
Yeah.
came here after my master's, I actually worked for a small boutique company, fashion company,
Okay.
as like a legal person, in-house legal person, and I did like copyright, trademarks, and stuff like that. And the switch happened, and I was like, this is great, but this is not fulfilling. And
Yeah.
that switch made me, it just happened, like that switch made me go and do some kind of work. I think one of the issues that I felt like it's so much in our head, and it's also like in the culture of the work that we had. I think we need to give more opportunities. So if
Mhm.
you have one line of work, doesn't mean that you cannot jump and do something else. And I was looking for that window.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I don't have to do a paid job. I can just volunteer. And I did this. A lot of nonprofit agencies who work with survivors of, gender-based violence, they do like a 60-hour trainings, right? It's
Mhm.
called trauma-informed training, so that
Mhm.
you kind of know how to go about it, how to work with survivors, and it's very ground level stuff. It's not like it has to do anything to do with like legal advocacy or legal project, but just if you want to volunteer on a hotline in a crisis situation, how to handle it. And I
Mhm.
found it to be so useful. It
Mhm.
burst a lot of things in my mind that I had. You work with domestic violence survivors, the first thing anyone, it's not only me, anyone, who has not worked in this area would be like, why don't they leave that person, right? It would be so much easier. But going in with that perspective, and learning so many different layers to it, right? How
Mhm.
this works, what happens, what are the things that you have to
Mhm.
think about. Um, it definitely changed it made the shift for me, and then I
Yeah.
basically jumped into what I was doing. what I
That's wait, that's amazing. Your story is like actually kind of mind-blowing that you had a whole law degree and you were beginning your career in India and then you decide to come here because as you said at the beginning, you're like exposure matters, like living in a different place matters, growing up matters. And then you come here and you make another huge life change when you're like, I'm going down this like IP route, etc. Like it's a very in some ways, I guess almost like safer path in some ways because it seems to be pretty straightforward. And then at some point, you're like, this doesn't feel good. This is not like making a difference. And then you make a jump into arguably probably one of the more like emotionally difficult and taxing parts of this, and also in a different culture. Like, I mean, I don't know, did you have any exposure to this type of law and what that looks like when you were in India and you were working, or was this your first exposure here? Do you have any like comparison between how the two function between here and there?
actually not really.
Yeah.
You know how I'm not going to blame, like, how our culture works, because I don't know, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's, like I said, like, I think it's the more protectiveness of, like,
Yeah.
family, our parents, they don't want you to go through that, because, it's
Yeah.
brutal and they're scared for you. So I never had that exposure. But I know that in law school, we studied, like, subjects like criminology, and we had the
Uh-huh.
stats. And I knew I wanted to do this, but I didn't have that window. And it was, we have also kind of like one set mind of, like,
Yeah.
okay, get a degree, get a job, get a house, get married, and
Yeah.
all that stuff, like a checklist.
Yeah.
And i I am happy for the people that works for them, but it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I always feel like this is the time for conversation, right? Like, this is the time. I firmly believe this, that you have one life. Do whatever you want to do, as long as it's not hurting anyone,
Cheers.
and as long it's fulfilling for you, right? I would say, if you want to be a unicorn, be a unicorn, right?
100%.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And
And I think a lot of people, I also am very much the same way. I'm not like a checklist person. I'm truly not a 5-year plan person. Arguably, maybe I should be more of a 5-year plan person. But I feel like, talking to people like you who are obviously making such a difference and who are like successful by a lot of society's standards, like you went to one of the top law schools and you're making such a difference every single day in your career. I think it's so fun and so validating for me to talk to people like this, because I'm like, yes, see, there are amazing people doing amazing things. They're not going according to that checklist, and you're living a life that you love and is like fulfilling to you, which is the most important thing. And I think a lot of people feel that itch of like unhappiness or not being fulfilled, and like their days aren't, what they want them to be. And like you said, you only have one life, and people tend to ignore those urges because they're like, oh, that's not practical, or that's not like possible. But you're the only one saying it's not possible to yourself. Like, no one else is saying it's impossible. And if you wanted to be a unicorn, the internet is a big wide place. You could find a bunch of people who want to be unicorns too. It's not that hard. Like, do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so important to be you. And we
Yeah.
tend to forget that sometime, right? We
100%.
never sit down and slow down and think about, hey, I want to do this. And yes, you, like you said, right, you need that support around you. And I'm glad to have that support. But
Yeah.
sometimes I work in a nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
I work for a nonprofit. For me, it's an honor. It's an honor
Yeah.
badge. But to explain someone, oh, you're not in a law firm, you're a nonprofit. Like, what's that?
Yeah.
How that does that look like? It's not a huge deal, but it takes a second for me to be able to explain the kind of work I do.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, do I need to explain anyone, right? That's
No, you
the question.
don't.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
literally don't. My friends and I always say this. I was just in New York last week, and
Mhm.
one of my best friends lives out there. I hung out with her entire extended group of
Mhm.
friends who are all Indian, honestly, and they're
Mhm.
all amazing and so much fun. And I know they're incredibly successful and very, very brilliant, but I could not tell you. And I've seen them a couple times. This wasn't the first time I've met them, actually. But I could not tell you what one of those people's jobs are, but some of them are my closest friends now. And I just think, even in my friend group, like, we don't know day to day what our work life looks like unless we know if we're like complaining about something and who we hate at work. But I couldn't tell you the day to day of like anyone's job. But it's not necessary for that connection. It's not necessary to have a great conversation with someone to be able to explain the ins and outs of like your career. It's arguably the least interesting thing about you sometimes, you know?
And that's what, right? That's what it is. That's the point, that goes
Yeah,
back to that checklist. Like, we have to remember that we are not defined by that checklist.
100%. Yeah.
So, absolutely, I 100% agree with you.
And I work in tech, so I'm truly not saving lives. Your work actually saving lives, so I think you should never hesitate to take up not even 1 minute, but like 10 minutes of someone's time to like explain the work that you're doing. But like the rest of us, we're not saving lives, completely unnecessary. Like, it's fine. But I want to just go back to like a couple of things you said at the beginning.
Sure.
When you moved here, you said you missed like your family and you just kind of moved here by yourself. What were some of the things that you just kept like returning to? And sometimes, we, at least when I'm away from my parents for a while, I'll still like hear my mom's voice like when I'm doing laundry, and she'll be like, don't put like these colors together and this fabric together. And like there are things that you start to remember. But what did you kind of like return to again and again to give you comfort? Because law school is also gruelingly difficult.
It is. It is. Definitely it is. One thing I would say that when I came here, my sister was already here.
Amazing.
So yeah, she was already in Northern California, so that was a comfort. And I'm the youngest in my family, so yes, so it was kind of like a protective shield, I would say.
Yeah.
And then I think the other part is like my sister and my brother-in-law were very supportive, right?
Yeah.
Also, I was at that point of time dating now my husband,
Oh,
and we were both at USC. He is an engineer and he was in engineering school, so that kind of
yeah.
like made me, gave me a sense of comfort, I would say.
Nice.
Uh,
Yeah.
that those two were the biggest like blocks for me to be able to like focus on what I was doing, because it's tricky, right? Like it's stressful to be all together into a different country, different culture, and for me I think sense of security and safety is like utmost like important, because
Okay.
right, so when I came here, just understanding how things were or how do you talk, or
Yeah.
the most funny thing that happened was that I learned to like hug people because that's the culture here, right? That wasn't so much when I was back in India.
Someone
So
did it in the workplace recently, and I was like, what? It's not my like first instinct.
completely,
I'm
yeah.
like a handshake person,
Mhm.
but people are huggers. I'm like, I've never met you before. Why would I hug you? Also, like, even my friends who are not like huggers, like, I don't know. That is, I feel like, more of an Indian thing to maybe not be like that.
Huh? Could
And
be.
yeah, I'm not sure because all my friends are like, yeah, people will just like hug people all the time here. I don't get it. But moving here, how being like Indian and growing up in India, but then
Mhm.
I'm sure you encountered like South Asians, Indian people when you were at
Absolutely.
USC. What was that like? Were you able to connect really easily, or what were like the biggest differences and similarities that you saw?
That's a very good question, because I would say that in my school, at law school,
Mhm.
there were like three Indians only, and everyone else were just international students from different country, and I
Yeah,
loved that, right?
yeah,
Because then I was forced to interact, and which I
yeah,
really, really appreciate, because now I understand the value of it.
yeah,
Otherwise, what I see is like, and there is no right or wrong part. You feel
100%.
so comfortable being with Indians around, because you kind of know the language, understand the culture. It just gives that sense of comfort. But the reason why I came to the US was just to be, go
Mhm.
out of my shell and just live the life and
Yeah,
be uncomfortable. Because if
yeah,
you are uncomfortable, you are on the right path. You are learning something
yeah,
new. You are understanding and you are exploring yourself. Back at USC, yes, we had obviously an Indian group, because you want also the sense of belonging that we were talking about, right?
yeah,
It was interesting. Every one was different, but I didn't get to like spend a lot of time with them, because my focus was law school, and these were all engineering students and from other, uh, other departments. But whatever interaction I had, it was fun, and they were very welcoming, and we used to go to that Garba nights, that and Diwali nights, right? Oh
yeah,
my goodness,
yeah,
yeah, definitely.
yeah,
And yeah, but on the part of like missing my family or going back to my family, I think I still do that. I talk to my parents every day,
yeah, yeah,
every day. So yes, I miss them, but I feel like I had that practical switch too, to be
yeah.
able to like, yes, talk to them every day, be able to like, thanks to technology, you're able to see them every day, right? So it doesn't feel like they're not there, because you're so busy throughout the day, but at the end of the day you go back to your parents. So that's really good. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so nice. And the point that you made about like everyone being so international and that's like what you came here to do, I think that's really, really unique too. Because I mean, looking at again, me and my friends, most of us are South Asian, Indian, to be honest. And I don't know how that ended up working out, but one of my friends who's in our friend group was like, everybody's brown, like, which is what we call like being like South Asian here. He's like, everyone is brown. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how this worked out. I feel like at least I've seen people go one of two ways. They
Mhm.
either go super into their community and they're like very enmeshed in it, not because that's the only thing that we connect on, but like you said, there's some sense of like, I understand the
Yeah.
shorthand of these interactions a
Mhm.
little bit more. And then I know that some people don't feel as connected and they go, which is not the case for you, but I think being born and raised here, people go like either super in or kind of way out. And there's less people with like a healthy balance in the middle. Not saying I have the healthiest balance because all my closest friends are South Asian, but most of my like work friends and colleagues are not. Like there's not one person I currently work with who is like Indian, South Asian, Pakistani, like none of that. So I
Wow.
think in my personal life, I really crave that because in my day-to-day life, I don't really get to see that pretty much at all. So yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely understand that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And yep.
And when you started going into this industry, so going back, not industry,
Mhm.
down this like specialization,
Mhm.
have you were there any preconceived notions that you had or things that really surprised you going into, such a sensitive area of work?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And preconceived notions are something that humans are built upon, right?
Really
Like,
do.
especially in our culture too. And it's not, I won't say it's bad or it's negative, right? You grow up, you take up things from the community. I'm sorry about my
Oh,
Alexa.
oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was
So
convinced mine was going to turn on because it's right behind my thing, my laptop.
exactly, that's
Yeah.
what happened. So it's just that as you grow up, right? I am so sorry.
Oh
Just
my God,
give
it's
us
totally
like
fine.
I am so sorry I had to disconnect it
Oh,
because
don't even sweat it. Don't even sweat it. Sometimes they like don't respond at all, and then sometimes they just don't want to stop.
and they just played a song. I didn't even make that command. I don't know what's happening. Oh my god. So, anyways, that's
Yeah.
technology for you. Uh, I was saying that as you grow up, you get some sense from the community, right? What they say, what their notions are, right? And you adapt it because that's what you need to be able to survive, right? Some things you learn from your parents, something you learn as you grow up and you see what's happening around and you have your mindset in, right? For example, one of the thing I said, right, that as for a domestic violence survivor, one of the biggest thing that we have and we talk about amongst friends, not me now, but
Yeah.
that's a general perception, right? That you should leave the relationship if it doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
And why aren't you, right? And this is the simplest example that I always say that put in. That's the notion I also had, right?
Yeah.
And it's not trauma informed, but I didn't know better when I started.
Mhm.
And that's why I took those trainings when I started, and it's very important to know everyone's role in that. So there
Mhm.
are so many preconceived notion. One of them was just this, right? Like why don't they leave the relationship? Or one of the other things that I've heard so much, not because I've worked in this field. It's been quite some time now. It's been
Yeah.
9 years. Oh my god,
Oh my God, wow.
that's exactly what I'm saying. I am old, so.
You're not old. I honestly would not be able to tell how old you are. I'd be like maybe mid-20s. Like you're giving
Oh,
mid-20s.
perfect. That
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
let's say that.
Yeah.
And I still hear this, right? Oh, these issues, gender-based violence, doesn't happen in our community. Like, what are you talking about? Domestic violence? No. Everyone is successful, everyone's rich, everyone has a job. This won't happen to me. And the other thing that when I was in India, actually, I learned, and I think still goes on, but I could be wrong, is that oh, it's their matter. Let's not talk about it. Like let's not interfere. Let's not take sides because a marriage is something that it's meant to last forever. Let's not talk
Yeah.
about divorce. Let's compromise, right?
Yeah.
I there are a lot of issues with these conversations,
Mhm.
but I'm not saying that everything that our parents or the community is portraying is absolutely wrong. They are coming from their beliefs, right? And I'm no one here to judge that or, put them in that box. What I am asking is, and I think that goes for everyone, is creating a space where you respect other person's perception,
Yeah.
right? Where you create the space to be patient,
Mhm.
let other person speak their mind, and let other person also decide what's good for them, right?
Yeah.
And how you empower that. And that's what I've learned. So yes, I've gone through a lot of trainings to be able to be here, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect and this is it.
Yeah,
There's
of course. Yeah.
so much learning that I have to do. But I understood this on very early when I started these trainings, and I started working with, service seeker and survivors, is that everyone has their story, even though stories in general looks like comes under a big umbrella. Everyone is different, right?
Yeah.
Same. And everyone has the right to choose what they want to do in their life,
Mhm.
and let's not judge them. If they want to go back in the relationship that doesn't work for them, if they want to report a sexual assault, more power to them. If they don't want to and they want just to let it be, that's their choice.
Mhm.
And we need to build more um, room for accepting that everyone has a choice in their life, and let them be. What you can be is a support to them and empower them so that they can make their own choices.
And I understand what you're saying. I feel like my knee-jerk reaction was initially like, no, like how can we let someone go back? Like, but that's kind of what you're saying. It's like
Exactly.
access to choice. It's like no telling people that they have choices and giving them the means to access those choices that they want to make.
Yeah.
And I think there is so little education about this. And the point that you made about like, I'm not here to judge how previous generations have done things. My friends and I always talk about this, and we always say like, in my family, we've my grandparents, my parents have been very lucky, like knock on wood. But
Mhm.
I know that when I hear it in my friends' families, they'll say, my grandma said, it's marriage is hard and you better prepare for like the worst. And it's like, what? I, and it's very intergenerational trauma informed. That's what they were raised with. They were like, marriage is going to be hard.
Mhm.
Bad things are going to happen. You have
Mhm.
to stay forever. And this is just how it goes. And they almost made it seem like their pain and like everything that they went through is 100% necessary.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's more like, no, it's actually not necessary to go through that. And you get to decide what you want to do
Mhm.
when something like this happens. And
Mhm.
ideally, you know, generations these days, and it's not even age bound, just like this time period, people hopefully have access to more education where they can say, I want to choose differently in my life. Like, yes, maybe I've been with this person for X number of years, but I
Mhm.
still get to live life and I still get to choose differently if I want to.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to a conversation about, and I think we need to like create that room for having those conversations, like what a
Mhm.
relationship looks like. My relationship would
Yeah.
be entirely different than your relationship.
Yeah.
But am I going to judge you and are you going to judge me? And
Yeah.
that's what we need to take out, right?
Yeah.
Judging other person on how they should behave, what are they wearing, or how are they in their relationship, right? As a family member or as anyone, you can be supportive, you can be a hearing aid. Sometimes we don't want solutions, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I just want to vent, and that's completely fine. I might be
Yeah.
really happy and I had a bad day and I had a fight, and that's what I want to do,
Yeah.
right? And I think what you said beautifully, that that they have this intergenerational trauma, and there might be a situation when they feel like, okay, well, that's how it's going to be. But I think the other part would be, and that's absolutely correct, I'm not like again saying anything that you said is not correct, but I think the other part is also that any relationship needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you have dated that person for like 10 years. Every relationship needs a
Yeah.
lot of work, right?
Yeah.
And would be days that, because of whatever has happened in the family, the person is reacting the way they are reacting. Or maybe you are in a relationship where things were different and now things are different because of numerous reasons, right? I mean, we just are in the pandemic,
Yeah.
right? Things are crazy as is. So
Yeah.
I think we need to be kind to ourselves and kind to others. You
Yeah.
keep on saying that I do incredible work and
Yeah.
I'm saving lives, but I think it goes back to the very core that we are all doing our part. I'm able to do my part because of everyone else, right?
Yeah.
If everyone is unkind, I don't think I can do my part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I am like a strong preacher of like, be kind to yourself so
Yeah.
that you can be kind to others. And it
Yeah.
goes back to, stop judging. And I think once we take the
Yeah.
judgment out, things will fall into places for everyone.
Yeah. And of course, I don't think anyone, either of us, is saying like,
Yeah.
obviously, there are, like you said, compromise is important in
Mhm.
relationships. People are going to react for certain things, but of course, never to like excuse the more egregious things, of
Absolutely.
course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I still feel like there are like, an argument, fine, but like the more egregious things, I think, at least I'm of the place where there's a
Mhm.
hard line there. And I just hope like
Absolutely.
we don't see those as flexible anymore because
Exactly.
the older generations have seen them as flexible. And it's like,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
that's where we're talking about this education, right? And I
yeah,
think it goes back to the part where maybe they haven't had that education.
yeah,
They were living for us, right?
yeah,
Our parents live for us, and that's what it is.
yeah,
And that's why I say, like, be kind to yourself. First, be
yeah,
kind to yourself so that you can give it to others. Otherwise, you have to strike that balance. You can't be
yeah,
selfishly living for yourself, but you have to strike that balance. And you're absolutely correct. Draw hard boundaries, but
yeah,
in order for you to draw hard boundaries, you kind of need to know what's happening. And people stay in the
yeah,
relationship for a longer period of time. And the little part that I talked about, like why people go back to the relationship,
yeah,
it's because they put in a lot of trust and love in that relationship. So
yeah,
when the first incident of violence actually erupts, right? And
yeah,
it's a continuous manipulation, but when that first incident, when I say incident, means more than just fights, right? More
yeah,
than,
and like an argument, yeah, yeah,
yeah, more than arguments, right? What would be that first incident could be more dramatic, right? Where
yeah,
you were not expecting. Could be physical violence, it could be
yeah,
coercive control, could be anything, right?
yeah,
When that happens, the person who is at the receiving end, for them, their world shatters,
yeah,
right? For them, it's just that they don't understand what has happened to be able to make any decision. At that point, they can draw that hard line and come
yeah,
out and seek help.
yeah,
But if you are not creating that space for them so that they can decide if they want to go back, and if they deal with this again, I will still be there for you. You
yeah,
come back as many times you want to. When you decide it's the end, I'll still be there. And
yeah,
that's what we need to do.
yeah,
As a family,
yeah.
just be there.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so hard to like
Mhm.
hear when someone's going through that, but like you're saying, it's people, I really feel like people don't know until they know themselves. Like you could tell them up and down,
Mhm.
like in a less extreme way. We've all had friends where they're dating someone. You're like, oh
Mhm.
my God, this man is the biggest POS on the face of the earth. Like you need to end it with him. And
Yeah.
it's like your friend won't know until she decides that that's her limit, and it's
Yeah.
so hard to
Mhm.
watch. But like you're
Mhm.
saying, all you can do is like listen and like remind her and be like, this is not what you said you wanted, but I'm still going to listen to you at the end of the day. And you're going to figure this out when you figure this out. And it sucks to
Exactly.
watch, but I think, unfortunately, that's what ends up happening is
Mhm.
you have to let them decide in their own time.
Yep.
Just like, yeah, the hardest thing, the hardest thing. And I know you said like you think like judgment is the biggest thing that is holding us back. Would you say that that's one of the things where you're consciously like for future generations, South Asian or not, for women in general, that's your biggest thing that you're like, this is one thing that we need to stop as a community or just, yeah,
I would say not even as a community. Everyone just should
just
be, right?
everyone. Yeah.
Everyone should be. Uh, I think for younger generation, most important thing, and judgment aside, because that's not going to happen soon, but I think that's something that I would want, because if you stop judging someone, you would stop controlling them, because it's so
Yeah.
interrelated, right?
That is so true. Yeah, people put you in a box when they judge you, and they never let you step out of that box. And it's like, I'm a person, and
Exactly.
you met me 10 years ago, and now I'm different, but not that different. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I completely understand, right? Like, and apart from that, my biggest thing that I've learned through pandemic is like mental health, right?
Yeah.
I think it just I one I mean one thing that I realize is to like slow down. We are
Yeah.
just going, like, people are texting each other, and face, not even FaceTiming, texting each other, sending messages, good morning, I love you and all that. I'm like, I'm right there. Look at me, and say it in my on my
Yeah.
face. Spend time with your family. I loved when I was in India, especially that I grew up in 90s, right? Oh my God, I'm a 90 kid, right? So,
Oh, don't
there,
worry, I am too. I don't know how old you think I am, but I talked to my 22-year-old sister, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying right now. No idea. I was talking to a 21-year-old while I was in New York, and I was talking to her, and I was like, I have no idea what you are talking about. Do you think I'm old? And she's like, no, I don't think you're old. How old are you? And I was like, oh, I'm 26. And she was like, I wasn't that old. And I was like, that old? What?
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. When
Yeah.
people ask my age, I just tell them that I'm 120 years old. That's completely fine.
You know what? Listen, but I would not want to be 21 ever again. Like
No, yeah.
22, biggest L. 22, I feel like all my friends and I always say this, 21, 22, some of
Hmm.
the hardest years of your life. And I'm like, you cannot pay me enough money to go back there. I'm like, it just,
Now that I think of it, I was like, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was just saying
yeah.
that I think when I grew up back in India, I grew up in an environment where there was like power cuts. It was very common during that time, and I loved that time because
Yeah.
it forced families to sit in one room
Yeah.
and have that, conversation, or like playing games. And I think that's what we are missing now. And I
Hmm.
encourage the younger generation and older as well, I would say, is
Yeah.
just to have that space, right? Connect with each other. I think that's really important, because if you connect with each other, you will be able to create a space to understand each other's perspective.
I
And
totally
that's
get
where
that.
the respect comes from, right? No one is, you are saying one point, I'm saying one point, right?
Mhm.
How is it that if my point has to be right, that means your point has to be wrong? It
Yeah.
doesn't work like that. We
Do you
can
think
both
that's
be right.
true? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think what you're saying about the texting and stuff, I get it because a lot of the way we communicate now is like no nuance communication. It's just like texting. Everything is so, you're just crunching everything you want to say into a 3-minute TikTok video or a 1-minute TikTok video or a 15-second video. And everything is all shorthand right now. And I think you can see it, especially on some place like Twitter, where
Mhm.
there are just like 20,000, literally 20,000 people arguing under a single tweet that they
Mhm.
expect. Like they think every piece of content, I talk about this at work a lot, but people think that every piece of content, every
Mhm.
tweet, every anything has to encompass
Mhm.
7 billion realities. And that's actually not possible. It's not possible. Whoever's making the thing, they're talking about their life and their experience. And then everyone's like, well, what about these people? Or what about this type of person? What if they feel bad if they see this? And it's like, she doesn't know that. She can only talk about herself. So there's no long form communication, I feel like now.
Absolutely. And literally, it's like we need to be more patient. We need to live our life
Yeah.
a little, and just, sorry, but I know this is social media, but like take some time off social media and connect with the real world. And
Me too.
yep,
There's this
everything
whole
will fall in place.
Yeah, and there's like a whole phenomenon now of like going for walks. Like people have rediscovered walking. And I'm like,
No.
what's up, guys? The outside has always been there. Like, but people are like, I go on a walk every single day. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. You should do that. I'm glad you're doing that. And Yeah. I mean, me on my 3 mile walks, I can't talk, but I just be wandering outside for like 3 miles at a time when I come home.
Yeah,
But
that's a lot. Good
it,
job.
no, it really resets your brain. It really does. And you'd be so surprised just like staring at a screen all day and then going outside. I'm saying the most obvious things, but it literally rewires your brain. It's terrifying that we've gotten so dependent like this.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Is there anything else that like we didn't cover, any information that you like want to share that you think is relevant or important that I didn't ask you about?
No, I think you covered it all. I just want to
Okay.
say that if anyone needs help or there are crisis line available, right? There
Yeah.
are domestic violence hotline, sexual assault hotline,
Yeah.
even suicide prevention hotline that they can just Google and it'll be there to, help and assist. And there are a lot of resources for people to get connected with if they are going through gender-based violence
Mhm.
of any kind, and explore options. So never hesitate in reaching out for help. Ask for help because people are not going to assume that one would need it. And just talk to these resources if there is a need for it. That's pretty much it.
100%. And like you said, just learning more about if you think you're going through something, if just learning more about it and feeling validated, I think could go
Mhm.
a really long way because like you said, you don't expect people to need help like this, but I guess always ask is the biggest thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Thank you so, so much again, Pyle. I really, really enjoyed this conversation and to leading the way in no judgment. Like you said, we just gotta be a little nicer to each other and ourselves. So yeah, thank you so much. And I'll talk to you really soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा